getting over a cold at the moment, so I apologise if I am a bit hoarse. As you can see, I really enjoy making an entrance. So thank you for the introduction. My name is Alannah Murray, and I am a first-year master's student in research by Creative Media. So my current scope of research is disability and visual culture, but judging on how little I've cried over it yet, I assume I still have a good way to go. In what little free time I have, as a postgraduate researcher, I advocate for disabled students through Disabled Women Ireland, and I have been known to lobby a government or two with USI as well. So basically, I make it my business to have the disabled student experience revolving around my life constantly. So when AHEAD asked me to come along, I obviously jumped at the chance. AHEAD is actually one of the reasons I went to college. When I was 17 and a very nervous sixth year, I didn't really know what services were out there. I'd never had to think about my own education before because it had always been my parents who had done a wonderful job. So I attended the Better Options Fair I think it was in the Helix at the time. And I spoke to an AHEAD representative who told me about the DARE scheme, so the Disability Access Route to Education. And with my school and with doctors, I filled in the form, and thankfully on reduced points after a very dodgy Leaving Cert, I made it into college to study film and television production. Before my induction, I met with the disability officer of DKIT, who talked me through the supports that were available, introduced me to my PA, and it was really refreshing to actually be asked what I needed, and rather than being told, okay, this is what we can give you, this is what you're getting, and that's it. So that really is the UDL at work. It was taking the disabled student experience and I suppose designing it around the student and what I needed. And what that done was it allowed me to enter into a degree where it would probably be considered inaccessible. You know, people, when I was going to college, they said, oh, you know, film, are you sure? So then out of spite, I had to do it. And what a brilliant support service allowed me to do was to follow through on that, and I was able to enroll. But it didn't come without its roadblocks. And while I am talking about the immensely positive experience I had with disability services, it's important to also consider why else I'm here, and it's to discuss what we can do better and how we can improve on disabled student experience. So a large part of my first 2 years of college was spent in the television studio in the college. And despite it being a new build in terms of the actual design of the building itself is the old Carroll cigarette factory, and it's a protected structure. And what protected structure always means for disabled people is this is what we have and we're not changing it. Because who needs education, not disabled people? And basically what happened with the TV studio was the control room was up a really narrow corridor up some steps, and I had no way to access the controls. So basically, because of my disability, I was not getting the same education as my peers. And while I had absolutely excelled at the floor manager job and I was at the top of my field, I felt it was time to move on to the actual work that my fellow peers were doing. So we tried to engage and we said, look, it's not accessible, this isn't acceptable. And we were met with some very strong resistance. But with the help of the disability services and my head of department and some very strongly worded letters, we eventually became the first fully wheelchair accessible TV studio on a college campus. And it was important to me not only as someone who was going through the degree myself, but having that facility there would mean that other disabled students could come in after me and they could have a much easier experience. I did, but at the same time, it could have easily been avoided if there had been more thought. And I think what's great about AHEAD is it promotes that thought, and there are more discussions, there are more opportunities for people like me to be seen on a stage and to talk about it. And on the subject of a stage, with the disabled student experience, it is a series of roadblocks and trying to play catch up to your peers. This year, I graduated with a BA Honours in Film and TV, and I became the first student in the history of my college to go up on stage to get my degree. So for the past 48 years, the president had been stepping off stage to give students in wheelchairs their degrees. There had been no ramp. There had been no facility there to allow disabled students to have the same experience as their able-bodied peers. And I, again, went to my wonderful disability officer who was completely on board, and she said, you know, I support you 100%, but nobody has done this yet, which of course spurred me on more. So we, again, were met with heavy resistance, and eventually, on the day, it took us defying the college's bylaws to get me on stage, because it was written that it was against policy to have access. We got a temporary ramp for the day, but temporary access is not enough for the future of the disabled student body. You know, we're multiplying at a rapid rate because of, obviously, with the great work that AHEAD is doing, and there are more equal opportunities coming. And a lot of that support is the reason I decided to do a postgrad in Dundalk, because they had been so good to me before, and I thought, you know, if I could get through the speed bumps of undergrad, postgrad would be easier. It wasn't. So I'm not sure how many people are aware, but according to a report by AHEAD themselves in 2016-2017, only 2.6% of postgraduates have a disability. And based on my experience, it's very easy to see why. A lot of my friends were getting their letters that they had been accepted for their masters, and you know, I was silently waiting on mine while I had transport to organise, because I live an hour away from college because there is no accessible accommodation. I had a PA to organise who was holding off on other offers because obviously she wanted to continue, you know, my educational journey. And the postgraduate offices seemed to have absolutely no concept of what I needed as a disabled student. You know, they didn't take into account the nuances that came with a disabled student. It wasn't just a case of ringing me and being like, oh yeah, come in 2 weeks, you can start then. You know, there were things to put in place that they weren't aware of. And I think that's a real testament to how rare disabled postgrads are, because they had never had a disabled postgrad before. They didn't know what I needed. And it was a much kind of bumpier transition. And nobody seemed to know in terms of funding. You know, I went into my undergrad and I was blessed that I had a grant and people were well versed in the schemes that were out there. But I kind of, once I got into postgrad, nobody kind of seemed to know what was out there for disabled postgrads. And I went in, no research stipend, no information on grants, living off my very, very patient parents. And I'm kind of at a crossroads where I'm trying to continue my education and I'm trying to further myself as a student with very little, I'm not going to say very little help because it sounds very harsh, but certainly a lot more at a loss than I was in undergrad. And I think that that's a real shame, because people would hear that and they'd be like, oh, well, if that's her experience as a very, very loud-mouthed individual, then how would I fare in postgraduate education? And it does have the potential to knock disabled students' competence. And what we need to be doing is bolstering our disabled students, you know, just because of a chair, just because of a visual impairment, of an extra piece of tech. Ableism should not knock disabled students out of the educational sector. It should not stop disabled professors coming on stream, disabled academics, you know, new research, like the research that I'm doing at the moment. Nobody has done that before. Nobody has looked at disability in film the way I am before. And we wouldn't have that research if I didn't go to postgrad, if I didn't have that support network that allowed me to enter postgraduate education. So I suppose it's important to note that in a way I am quite similar to Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. The whole point of this conference, I ended up on a whirlwind adventure where, at least for some of it, I had no idea what was going on. And I met a very diverse group of people, and some of them needed courage, some of them could have done with a bit more brains, but we all banded together and we overcame the obstacles, and eventually I figured it all out, and I'm still on that journey. And that is because of great lectures. It's because of a wonderful disability service. It is because of strangers like yourselves, an entire room of you that have this power in your hands to advocate for students like me. And, you know, disabled people, I've always said, are some of the loudest people I've ever met, because we have to be, because nobody is shouting for us but us. So I think it's important to recognize that you, as strangers, as advocates, as academics, you have that power to, I suppose, smoothen out the cobblestones of that yellow brick road to make it an easier, more fulfilling, more diverse journey for disabled students like myself that maybe aren't able to shout as loud and don't have that courage, don't have the heart, because they have been knocked down by so many different obstacles. So what I would say to you as an audience is recognize your power, lend it to those who may not have as much as you do, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you very much.